Hello and welcome to my show. My name is Rashanka Jones, and today I have with me Liam Naden. He is a neuroscience author, coach, mentor who helps people escape stress.
Okay.
All right, welcome, Liam. How are you doing?
Hi, Rashanka. I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me on your show. I'm looking forward to it.
No, thank you. I'm excited to talk about how one can use their brain to its maximum potential in, their relationships and marriage. So let's dive right into it. When I was reading your introduction, I read that you've studied this deeply, and you say that the brain is divided into four parts, and there's a thrive switch. Can you explain a little bit about that, please?
Well, I think the essential thing that we've all forgotten as human beings is what is the purpose of nature? What is the purpose of life? We all think, well, my purpose, if you want to call it that, is to stay alive. But there's actually a deeper biological purpose, which is completely what our purpose is. And that purpose is to thrive. And the law of thriving, which governs every living thing, says that every living thing is designed to be the best that it can be so that it has the greatest chance for survival. And over millions of years, nature has figured out the most efficient way to survive is for things to be their best, not to have problems, not to struggle, whether it be finding food or shelter or just in living, but to be its best. That's how it works. Now, there's only one species that doesn't live like that, and that's humans. It's because we're not using the mechanism, the machinery, the right way. We're not using our brain the way it was designed. But funnily enough, for 97% of human history, we did use it the way we were supposed to. We were living in a thriving state, and it's because we were living in harmony with our natural biology. But it was only relatively recently we got out of sync with our natural biology, and guess what happened then? All of the problems showed up. The disease, the war, the conflict, the problems in life, and the unhappiness. That is the fundamental thing to understand.
So, what are the four parts of the brain that you have spoken about previously as well in your podcasts?
So the four parts, there's firstly what I call your interpreter brain, which is where all the thinking happens. And what your interpreter brain does is it interprets everything in your life. So you look around and you go, I'm Liam, you're Rashanka, that's a tree behind you. So we label all of these things, we create language around it, and we store this information to be able to identify things and also to communicate. Second part is your emotional brain, which is located just below your interpreter brain. And that's obvious, it creates emotions. It produces chemicals that make you feel a certain way, happy, sad, those things. The third part is what I call the survival brain. The survival brain manages all your automatic functions because you need to be able to survive without thinking about it. You don't have to figure out how to keep your heart breathing or heart beating or your lungs working or all of the trillions of things that are happening in your body every moment. And the survival brain is at the back of your skull, connected to your neck. And there's one really important thing it manages, and that is how you deal with threats and dangers. So when the brain was created, we lived in a physically dangerous world. So we developed this mechanism to be able to identify a danger and then react without thinking, without using the thinking brain, to be able to have the appropriate response to remove that danger. So we might run away or shout for help or stand and fight, the fight, flight, freeze. It's that instinctive reaction. That's all the survival brain kicking in and saying, let's do that to solve that problem, to get rid of that danger or that threat. The fourth part of your brain is what I call the thriving brain. This is the part of your brain that's supposed to manage you and your life to make sure that you live your biological purpose. You thrive, which means you deal with problems effectively. You make the right decision so you don't create problems in your life. It's where we have that little voice that says, you shouldn't marry that person, or you shouldn't do that. It's where that little voice says, look, you want to say something to your wife, don't you? You want to criticize her for something she did. But the little voice says, hey, don't do that. It's not going to help. But you go and you say, no, something in me, I need to say it. So you blurt out something critical and hurtful, and you feel some slight relief from saying it because you're in your survival brain. Your survival brain is forcing you to do that, making you do the wrong thing. But your thriving brain, which has that little voice, when you activate and when you follow that little voice, you actually do the right thing. It knows what you should do in every moment for you to thrive. It knows how to inspire you. It knows the right ideas. So these are the four parts of the brain. And the way you're supposed to live, and the way we live for nearly all of human history, is our thriving brain was in control. Our thriving brain dominated. So we lived in a thriving state. We didn't do the wrong things. We were far healthier and happier than we are now. All the archaeological and anthropological evidence shows that. And we
What's
live.
changed?
Pardon?
What's changed since then and now?
Well, that's what is in my new book, The Thrive Switch, because we went from being really healthy to having lots of disease. We went from having harmonious lives to creating war and destruction. There's no evidence of any, humans have been around for about 300,000 years, and for 288, 290,000 of that, 97%, there's no evidence that we had any conflict, any large scale
So
conflict.
many conflicts in, England, France, England going to India, and there were so many conflicts. I personally feel that we are living a much better life right now. There's more medicine, there is access to better healthcare facilities, there is just better quality food. People are living much longer. So I don't agree with the fact that things were better earlier. I feel people were dying at like 40, 45 because of syphilis and all these other diseases because there wasn't any cure for that.
Well, how far back are you going into history to say that things were worse than they are today?
I mean, if you're picking time periods, I do feel that there were certain times when things were worse than what they are today.
You have to go back 12,000 years, and that's a long way back before, the English and the French and all those sorts of things. But there was a massive shift that happened between 10 and 12,000 years ago, and all of the skeletal records, all of the fossil records, everything shows that before then, we were a lot healthier. We were on average 5 inches taller. And there was this sudden decline. It wasn't just gradual, it was this virtually instant decline where people were sicker. All sorts of diseases started showing up. People's bones became a lot more brittle. The brain shrank, the jaw shrank, and crowding of teeth started to happen. None of this happened before. So I'm going way back, but what the records show, you see, humans have been around for 300,000 years, but the last 12,000 years, we did something very different. Whatever food we needed, we found, caught, and ate. Then we went to agriculture, and what agriculture did was we were suddenly eating foods that weren't suitable for us, and the health just declined dramatically. Now, this isn't me pushing any barrier. This is just what the proof says. Our health declined suddenly, and diseases started to show up, like cancers, diabetes, and all of the heart problems that weren't really there before this. And with agriculture, the other thing that happened was we started to create hierarchies and structures and organization. So we started to create things like property. You had to have someone in charge, and you had to have all of the people working for them. And we created things like greed because we now had property ownership. Because remember, for agriculture, you can't just grab what's there. You have to plant and you have to plan and you have to be around in the same place in a year's time for when it's ready. And you have to protect that. That's your food. So with that, we started to create all of this conflict between people. And the other thing that happened was people started working a lot harder. People were sicker, far less happy, and working a lot harder. Now, why would they choose to do that? Choose to work 12 hours a day tilling the fields to get food that made them sick? Why would they do that when before that they lived a happy, natural, longer life? The average lifespan went down by 20 to 25 years when agriculture came along. It didn't go up. So we created this civilization around agriculture where we needed structure, ownership, property. So all of these things, they actually happened after this big shift. So they were the result of using our brain in a different way. That was the big shift. When we went from operating primarily from our thriving brain, that part that I say is supposed to be in charge and was for 97% of our time and didn't give us any problems, we went from using that to using our survival brain, the one that's focused on problems, that makes us feel stressed, worried, afraid, and gets us to do the wrong things like shout at someone in an argument or eat the wrong food.
So, we've talked about like what are the four parts of the brain and how the thrive part of the brain is supposed to be the dominant part because that's how it was in the past. Now that most people are using the survival part of the brain, what are some things or strategies that and I want to go to the, I want to talk more about relationships and marriage, because you said that the thrive part of your brain basically tells you to do the right thing, right, and not do the wrong thing. But in a marriage, two people may think that they both are right, right? In one person's head they would think that they are right, in the other person's head they would think that they are right. So what are some strategies one can use to switch on the thrive part and also know that what they're saying or doing is actually the right thing and it's not coming from the survival part of the brain?
Well, you raise a very interesting point in that question, because you said two people in a relationship, one thinks they're doing the right thing and the other person thinks they're doing the right thing. But how about a situation in a relationship where doing the right thing is not necessarily hanging on to your opinion, because you saying, this is what I think is the right thing, that if you use your thrive brain is going to show you what the right thing actually is. If you're in a state of stress and you're using your survival brain, you can only guess at what the right thing is. So you're spending all this time trying to analyze what is the right thing to do. But the natural way to live in a relationship, if we're talking about that specifically, is not to hang on to what the right thing to do is. It's just to just relax, be instinctual, allow things to happen. Great relationships, that's what they do. And a clue to this, everyone's had a great relationship once when they first met the person, when they first got into the relationship. Weren't things great? Didn't things flow pretty well? You weren't worried about things. You didn't have problems. You weren't arguing about things. You were just acting naturally. You're acting instinctively. So the right thing to do maybe is not to take it personally when someone, or not to hang on to your opinion.
Oh, yeah, no, that makes sense. I personally feel that, brought up a really great point that when people start dating initially, they don't have arguments, everything is smooth sailing. I think that the reason for that is because at that point, the couple or, the individuals value each other more because they need them at that point. As the relationship grows, time passes, they forget that feeling of needing them as much, right? And they take that partner for granted. And that's when arguments happen, fights happen. So, like a simple reminder of just telling yourself that don't take this person for granted. They can leave you at any time. I think also switches on your thrive brain to tell you that let things go.
Well, how do you account for people who've been in a marriage for 30 years and they don't take each other for granted? There's plenty of people like that. Not plenty, but there are some who don't take each other for granted, and they haven't done any marriage courses or done it consciously, but they know each other so well. They love each other. They're crazy about each other, and they spend all their time together. How do you account for that? There's something else going on rather than just learning a technique. And what I'm saying is you don't need to learn a technique, because when you use your thrive part of your brain, it's going to get you to do the right things. Now, one of the things it might do is get you to leave that relationship if it's the wrong one. Because I've done coaching for people who've been in marriages for 20, 30, say 30 years sometimes, occasionally, and they've been miserable for 29 and a half of those 30 years. And I say to them, why are you still there? And they say, oh, we can work it out. We just need to learn a new technique. We just need to not take each other for granted. I just need to learn to be a better person. And, you know, why is that? They're not operating, whereas their thriving brain would have said to them 29 and a half years ago, is this the right relationship for you? It either is or it isn't. It's either going to work or it's not. And if it's not the right relationship for you, you need to be in the right relationship for you to make you thrive. If this isn't the one, it's like a job. So our thriving brain doesn't have all these rules that we've created that are based on our fears about what must happen for other people not to criticize us, or for us not to criticize ourselves and think we're a failure, or for us not to leave us out alone and lonely with nobody to love us. Our thriving brain doesn't do that. It brings us what is best for us. And it might be a learning experience, being married to someone for a while and then it no longer being right. It might be being married to someone for forever. But it'll bring us the right things for us and for everybody else if we learn how to operate from this place rather than from a place of fear.
So how does one, when couples or any other relationship, even if it's a friendship, there's a fight going on and, people say things, hurtful things to each other. In that moment of heat, how does one switch to the Thrive brain and tell themselves that, like, this is not something that I should be doing right now? Like, what is that one strategy a person can use?
That's the million-dollar question, because that's what the Thrive switch is, which is what my book's about. But I'll tell you really what it is. And I'm a little bit reluctant to say what it is, because without explanation, people say, well, that won't work. But try this. If you're having an argument, or it really comes down to not just an argument, if there's anything that's making you feel anxious, worried, annoyed, stressed, angry, all of those emotions, they're actually created in your emotional brain, and they lock you into survival state. So when you're in that emotional state, when you're using your survival brain, you're never going to do the right thing. You're never going to be able to find the answer to what you should be doing. So you need to switch to the Thrive part of your brain. But what's actually happening in the moment, what's causing you to feel anger, what's going on in your brain is not the argument. It's a story that your brain is telling you about the argument. So your subconscious, if you like, or your brain, your survival brain is running a story, which is not the reality. And it's saying to you things like, you need to win this argument. You need to get them to see your point of view. You need to make sure they understand you. And you have a big problem here. If you don't solve this problem, it could mean the end of your relationship or marriage. Or if it doesn't mean the end of it, it's not going to be as happy as it could be. So you need to solve this problem. You create a story about it, which is, oh, they can't leave me. If they did, I will end up alone and lonely, and I'll feel a failure. And I'll look back with all of these regrets, and all our children are going to be harmed and everything. And the mere fact that you're telling yourself a story separates you from your thriving brain, because it's separating you from the experience. This is the change. We went from experiencing life to telling stories about life, to labeling things. So I'm giving you the book in a nutshell, and the book goes a lot more detail about what we did differently with our brain. But all you need to know, the magic, 2 words, drop it. And what you're dropping is, you're not dropping the argument, you're dropping the story. And when you do, your Thrive brain kicks in, and you do something instinctively that actually works. You just say, I'm going to drop the thinking. I'm going to stop the story.
I mean, that is true in some cases. I would agree with you, but sometimes people have to stand up for themselves so that they're not a pushover, they're not being taken advantage of, they're not being treated badly by a partner or a friend or a parent, right? You have to stand up for yourself and be assertive. In those situations, you cannot drop. Drop it
Well,
is not the right answer.
so no, I'm not saying it is. I'm just giving you some examples of what happens when you drop the story, because your best response might be, from your thriving brain, your best response, depending on your situation, might be to say, look, I'm not going to put up with you treating me like that. I'm not going to stand for it. That is not acceptable. And I am going to walk away and not come back until you can talk to me sensibly. That might be your response. But what I'm saying is, this happens instinctively and you do the right thing. I was just giving you a few examples of what you might do. And the problem is, what we all do with our brains is, we hear this and we think, I know the answer to that. But we're using our thinking brain to come up with the answer. We're not using our instinctive, thriving brain, which knows the answer. It knows what you should do for you and for that situation. And it's going to be the right thing to improve your situation, to get you into a thriving state. And it might be walking out and saying, I'm never going to talk to you again, or how dare you treat me like that? But you're going to do it in a way that works, not just an angry way that keeps you stuck. So this isn't being passive. This is the opposite. This is being proactive about your life, rather than being held back by fear that you shouldn't do something.
So you think compromising is the best strategy to keep a marriage intact? When you say drop it, it kind of means like, okay, just let it go, right? And compromise.
Exactly. What I mean by drop it, the best strategy, there's only one thing that creates every single problem in every marriage, and that is fear. People are worried about what the other person's going to think or do, or whether it's all based on fear. When you first get into a relationship, you don't have any fear, and you say, look, whatever happens, happens. If we end up staying together, we stay together. If we wake up in the morning and decide we don't want to be together, we're not together. The best relationships are where people want to be there. They're not there because they feel they have to be. And that's the big difference. What's the difference between people who are in a good marriage and people who aren't? And I saw the pattern, and the only pattern was the people in a good marriage weren't worried about being there. They had no fears about it. The longest relationships were the ones that said, we'll stay together as long as it works for both of us. Every spiritual and religious tradition tells you to think that. You're going to be fine. Have faith, believe, trust, allow. It's all going to turn out fine. Just like it is in the rest of nature, it all turns out fine. So if you want a great relationship, you need to get rid of the fear. What is the things that's stopping you from being yourself? Not just in that relationship, but in your life. And just say, I'm going to be me. I'm not going to be afraid of what happens. I'm not going to say I need to do a technique to make sure this marriage works. Just trust yourself. Trust life, that you are going to do the right things.
That's great advice, and thank you so much for that. But I want to understand, what are the red flags of a friendship or a relationship that, you brought up this point that just be yourself, don't be fearful of showing your true self, be authentic, and then automatically things work out in a relationship or friendship.
No, I didn't say that. I said things will turn out the way they're supposed to, that is
They're
best for you.
supposed to.
Yeah.
Yeah. But sometimes what I've noticed is that if you're yourself and you're vulnerable, not so much in marriage, because marriage is mostly about vulnerability, but in friendships, I feel that in today's day and age, if you're vulnerable in a friendship, the moment you show that side of yourself and you're authentic, a lot of people can't handle it and they just leave, you know? So how do you handle or navigate that part of
Well,
your life?
why would you need to navigate it? Where's the problem in that? Somebody who's not suited for you leaves your life. Where's the problem there? What is vulnerability? Vulnerability is feeling afraid. You're afraid that you're going to get hurt when you're open and honest. But when you're in a relationship with anybody, who are the leaders we admire the most? The people who are prepared to be vulnerable and say, I'm not perfect. I'm prepared to just put myself out there. And if you like me, great. But if you don't like me, I'm not afraid of people not liking me, because I know that I'm a good person. I have no fear about myself, and I don't have a fear about a relationship. So if somebody makes me uncomfortable in a relationship, I express a feeling to somebody and they react in a way that I don't like or that I feel they shouldn't, I've got a choice. Do I accept it or not? And if you're afraid, if you're based on fear, then you think you have to accept it, but you don't. And the other thing to realize is what actually the hurtful thing, it's not what the person said, it's what you think it means. Again, it's your story. You're hurting yourself. You could say, if they don't like what I said or they're going to attack me in some way, they're not worth my time, because I know I'm a good person. I don't deserve to be attacked. So you don't feel vulnerable in that situation. All your vulnerability, and I know this is a difficult one for a lot of us to accept, but how we feel is not based on what happens. That's the story we tell ourselves about what's happening. But when you get over your own fears, people look at you, the right people look at you, and they recognize you for who you are. And they're the sort of relationships you want to have. When someone sees who you really are, despite all your imperfections, that's the foundation for a great relationship, a long-term relationship.
Oh, I love that. I totally agree with that. That makes so much sense. Before we end today's podcast, I want to understand one last thing. So we divided the brain into four different parts. A lot of times people just shut off. By shutting off, I mean they just completely uh, don't want to have any confrontation, don't want to talk about things, just go into their little bubble or in their hole. What part of the brain is working then? And is that the right thing to do when someone upsets you or confrontation makes better sense?
Well, if you think about the biological weapon, if you like, we have to fight off a threat or a danger, we can only do one of three things. We can stand and fight, we can run away, or we can freeze and do nothing. It's the fight, flight, freeze. And we see this in relationships. If you're having an argument, you can stand there and fight and argue, or you can run away and say, I'm not going to talk about it, or you can just stand there and think, I don't know what to do. I'm doing nothing. So this is a biological reaction to what your brain is telling you is a danger, is a threat. Now, it might not be real because remember, it's telling you a story. So whenever you freeze, and this is depression, inaction, lack of motivation, all of those things come from the survival brain because that's a reaction to what it's telling you is a threat to your survival. People say to me, oh, when you use the thriving brain, does that mean you just sit in a corner and, all this magic stuff happens to you and all these good things come to you and, everything just works out perfectly. It's the opposite. You become super productive. It's a bit like when you're doing something you're enjoying, you're not thinking about the time or anything, and you're just doing stuff. So if you find yourself not knowing what to do and feeling paralyzed by fear, it's this part of your brain, the survival brain, trying to protect you because you're telling a story. And again, I go into a lot more detail in the book about this, how this works.
How do you switch? That's what I'm trying to understand. Like, how do you go from that negative mindset to your positive mindset?
You just say to yourself, you recognize I'm telling a story, and it doesn't matter what the story is. You just say, I'm telling myself a story. I drop it. I'm not going to tell myself a story at all. I know this sounds really simplistic, but maybe try it. People who are listening, just try it. Because as I say, this is the one thing we didn't do for 97% of history. We didn't tell ourselves stories. We lived instinctively. We've forgotten how to live through this intelligence. And that's what you do when you switch to the right part of your brain that is connected to your natural intelligence. And really, life is a completely different experience when you do that.
That's so insightful, an amazing conversation. What's one piece of advice you would give your listeners today who want to use their brain to its maximum potential?
Well, I think the thing is, everything I've said, if it resonates at all, the best thing you can do is not a quick fix, because a quick fix is the survival brain. The quick fix is a lion's about to eat you, jump out of the way. So there are no quick fixes. The quick fix is to start to say, I want to understand how my brain works so I can start to use it the right way. Because once I start to understand it and use it the right way, it won't become a theoretical idea. It'll become an experience. And you'll go, how did that happen? I see, it was my thriving brain that actually made it happen. That's the most important thing. And then when you get that switch, you will act naturally. Because the problem is we have this idea that we have to have faith, we have to believe, we have to try things. We don't believe anything. We hope. We hope things will work out. We say, yeah, let go and allow and all that. That's not what we do. And the reason we don't do it is we don't understand how it actually works. So best thing we can do is start to understand who we really are, how our brain is designed to work, and then with that understanding, try these things and start to get an experience of it. And then that's when the snowball happens. That's when, you change all of these decades, centuries of false beliefs and false ways of doing things that we've all been told that life's a struggle. You have to work hard. Problems are inevitable. Problems are good for you. It's not like that anywhere in the rest of nature, and it wasn't for us for 97% of our history. So we need to wake up and just start looking in a different place.
Thank you so much. This has been such an insightful conversation. Where can the listeners find you? What's the best place to reach out to you?
Well, if you'd like to, the book hasn't been released yet. It's called The Thrive Switch. But if you'd like to be notified of when it's released, it's just at thethriveswitch.com. Or if you want to connect with me directly and find out a lot more about all of this, which I've got on my own website, which is just my name, liamnaden.com. And if people want to contact me, and if they've got any questions or, comments, love to hear from people. But my website, liamnaden.com, my name, Liam Naden, this is the
That's
best
an
place
easy
to get
one.
hold of me.
Well, thank you so much, Liam. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, subscribe, and share. I will be putting Liam's details in the description section in case you want to reach out to him. His book will be out soon, so watch out for that one. He also has a YouTube channel, and I'll put the link for that in the description section as well. Until then, this is Rishanka Jones signing off.